Beyond 3D. Welcome back this week to another edition of Beyond 3D, coming to you live from the RPP Studios 98.7 and 98.3 on the Mornington Peninsula. This evening, Matt and I are tag teaming. We're both incredibly busy, and that does not mean that we are not committed to delivering a informative show for you this evening. First guest that we have tonight, Matt is going to run an interview with Adele Edwards, whose specialty is timeline therapy. And stick around for that interview. After Adele, we've got a very important message to everybody from Dr. Stephen Greer in relation to disclosure and releasing all the information on the free market for 0-point free energy devices. Here's my co-host, Matt Adams, with an amazing interview with Adele Edwards in regards to timeline therapy. Beyond 3D.
Adele, welcome to Beyond 3D. Hopefully you're having a good evening yourself.
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem whatsoever. So now, timeline therapies. It's a very interesting concept, and I wanted to delve into that and see what was exactly going on. But as far as I'm concerned, I believe the story that you would have is how this came about, and it would have a connection to Thailand. So why don't we start there?
Okay. Yeah, that's a bit of an interesting one. Probably going back for a few years now. I actually had a client come along and for treatment, and I hadn't seen this lady before, and she came in and I did my usual thing, and she turned around and she said to me, you know, you're going to go to Thailand, and I'm here because I have to tell you that you have to go. And I'm like, okay. No, I don't see Thailand. I'm getting married in Bali, so maybe that's what you're picking up on. And she's like, no, you're going to go to Thailand. It's really important that you go. And when you get there, you're going to go to a temple, and there's going to be big snakes out the front of the temple, and you have to go because there's a statue in there, and you have to go and see this statue. I'm like, okay. And I said, well, why do I have to see the statue? She said, well, because it wants to send you good energy and send you blessings, and it's really important that you go. And I said, okay. So I just kind of went with that, and, you know, months went by, and I never actually saw the woman again, which was interesting. She sort of came, and she came and she left, and anyway, so I end up in Thailand, believe it or not, and it was funny because this particular day, and I still hadn't actually lived back to the conversation with this woman. It was like months had gone by. I'd forgotten all about it. End up in Thailand going to a course over there, and everyone's going on a tour, and I thought, no, I don't really want to go on that tour. I think I'll go on a tour with this other woman who was going and seeing temples. So anyway, I rang up my husband, and he was chatting away, and I said to him, I'm going temple touring today. And then he said, Adele, do you remember that lady that came to see you and said you were going to go to Thailand the temples? And I'm like, oh, that's right. So anyway, off I went on this temple tour, and I came across many temples. So this particular one, though, this day that I went into, I hadn't took much notice of the outside of the temple. But as I kind of got inside, there were all these monks sitting in their tent. You know, young children. It was actually at school. And their teacher was up on the stage. And so I walk in, and there's an area where Westerners can sit. And I sat down, and you know, the teacher's not far, and I'm just meditating with these children, and they're chanting, and then all of a sudden I see myself in my mind's eye get up and go up to the teacher and start doing this prostration like I was an Indian person, down on the floor and back up, and it went on and on and on, and I couldn't stop it. And as I kept doing this, there was this feeling of expansion and peace. And so anyway, the person I was with at the time tapped me and said, come on, let's go. And I've got up and I've walked out, and I can't talk, let alone hardly walk out of this place. And I'm thinking, what's just happened to me? That was really bizarre. So we get back, and I get talking to some of the Thai people, and this lady, so I tell her about my experience, and she goes, "You know, that was the teacher, but that was a statue." And I said, "What do you mean?" So in this part of Thailand, they have like wax statues of their, you know, their gurus and teachers and whatnot.
Okay, yeah.
And so I'm like, oh wow. So I thought this actual person that I was pretty much sitting in front of was real and living. That's how real this statue was.
Mm.
So I got up, and I, you know, when I left, and I thought to myself, gee, that was a distinguished kind of, you know, shift in myself after that. And she said, yeah, that's the statue. And then when I look back, I'd taken photos, and out the front were the two snakes. So I thought, that's pretty interesting. That kind of lines up. And I didn't really think a whole lot more of it. It was like, wow, that was just a coincidence, I guess you could say. And I came back, but from that point, my life actually changed quite dramatically. A lot of the things that I was doing, that I was connected into, all just changed. It was like something had flicked a switch, and I sort of found myself in this space of, I thought I knew what I was doing in life, and now I have no idea. So the journey from there has been quite interesting. And just quickly on that, months later, I was at home, I was asleep, and I woke up at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and this voice literally said to me, Adele, get up. And I'm like, I'm just going to actually pretend I didn't hear that. And so I just tried to close my eyes and, you know, pretend that didn't happen, and it didn't stop. Adele, get up out of bed now. So something said it was okay, but it was quite confronting. So I got up, and I was told to go and get a notebook and a pen. And for hours, I sat and I wrote all this stuff, but just things about my life that I wasn't clear on, just all started to come through. And from that point on, I got really into my writing, and I guess channeling this information about the timeline healing that I've been doing. So that's kind of, you know, the story up till now. And I guess it's just been trying to understand it and apply it in the clinic and with people. And it's been very interesting, but it's also been really amazing to watch some of the shifts in people that have, you know, been struggling for a long time. So I've really been enjoying it, and that's where I am today, I guess.
Well, that's excellent. So you're here in the Melbourne area, and you have a clinic, and you do help people, and you do energy healing and different kinds of healing modalities on clients.
Yes.
That's what you do. So we'll go over, because we've known each other for a long time now, but in general terms, because we're both into the healing modalities, but going back a little ways, we met in pranic healing with Master Choa.
Yeah.
Which was an esoteric science in and of itself, but you'd need a few shows to go over something like that. But just some of the things that you've done going back in the past, and maybe you can just talk about how it helped you get to where you are now. So we can start with, let's say, flower essences. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, because if I look back at all those different modalities that I've studied, I guess what has drawn me to all of them is more the energetic side of it. And I guess you don't really know why you're drawn to something, and you can't necessarily join the dots when you're looking forward, but you can look back and go, oh, now it all makes sense why this and why I was drawn to that. Mm-hmm. The flower essences really drew me in because I'm really into trees and plants, and, you know, here in Australia we have some of the oldest and we have some of the most, we have the largest amount of flowering plants in Australia. So I think there's a lot of wisdom here and in nature. And, the flower essences have been a great journey because they really bring that healing energy from the earth and enable that to work on a deeper level with people. So I've found them to be really supportive in, clearing beliefs, worries, stresses, old patterns and programs, things that people necessarily don't even know why they do something or where it comes from. And because they're quite subtle, they just work there in the background and help the person to release these imbalances, I guess you could say, or things that they're struggling with. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed working with flower essences. They've been quite profound.
And then also along that line, so flower essences have the subtlety involved in the ancient plants, as you said, especially on this continent, Australia. Then you also have more hands-on type therapies, which would be like Bowen and Shiatsu.
Yes. So the thing I liked about, the Bowen and the Shiatsu is that they are quite a gentle yet powerful way of treating the body, especially with Bowen therapy, because you're working mainly with the fascia over the muscle, and you're just giving the body a set of instructions and then allowing the body to unravel itself and adjust itself. Because, at the end of the day, the body is super intelligent. It knows what it needs to do to bring itself back into balance. So I like the fact that Bowen works quite energetically as well. And Shiatsu too, understanding all the meridians, the acupuncture points, how to actually feel the quality of energy in someone's physical body, in their organs, has been really beneficial for me. And I guess too, because we've done the pranic healing and we've learned how to really feel energy and tune into energy on that level. So, when I started to do that hands-on stuff, it actually came quite easily because I guess we'd already been trained in that. The Shiatsu is a really great way of just bringing balance back in, clearing, moving the energy in its correct formation, because energy does move through the body in a certain configuration. Shiatsu's been a really great tool for that as well.
Absolutely. So this Saturday evening we are talking to Adele Edwards about timeline healing. We'll take a quick break and we will return.
Beyond 3D.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Beyond 3D. We are talking with Adele Edwards about timeline therapies. Now, Adele, we have a couple more to go through here. We mentioned pranic healing earlier, but what we also have is we have more of the, for lack of a better term, the ancient equivalent of allopathic medicine today. So you have Chinese traditional medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. You also have Ayurveda from India. So you also know a little bit about those and use those as well?
Yeah, look, it's interesting because I studied the TCM first, and now understanding both of them, they're actually saying the same thing. They just express it in a different way. So the Chinese will talk about qi, whereas the Ayurveda will talk about the doshas, and understanding how food and diet and exercise, meditation, well-being help. So they're both like a full package on health and well-being. But I found when one was a little bit tricky to understand, the other one gave me the information. So it was a very interesting journey to see how similar they were. I guess the Chinese, they're meat eaters, and the Ayurvedic philosophy is they're vegetarians. So that was the difference there that was kind of interesting. But yes, both of them gave me an understanding on diet and how the body actually needs to function to be healthy. From a Chinese medicine perspective, when we're eating food, our spleen actually extracts all that energy from the food, and it sends that energy up into our lungs and heart area, and then our stomach descends and gets rid of what we don't want. And then we breathe in air and it all gets mixed together and then pushed into the liver to develop good blood and healthy qi. So if we're not getting it right from the beginning with what we're putting in our mouth, our body is not actually able to produce what we need to get through our day. And it's been a really great tool to understand how to, make sure that the body's functioning, because so much of our emotional state is also based upon us not eating right and not knowing what to eat. So I guess those two modalities really gave me a deeper understanding into the physical body, but from an energetic perspective again. So, they spoke about the energetics in food and what, if you're suffering with something, then the right type of food energetically to actually correct that. So, that was a really great journey as well, understanding all of that. And I guess I feel like it's all come together, and then you find your way with, what works. And I feel, I guess, you can at least give somebody a bit more of a package when it comes to this is what you need to do to get better and this is how you do it. So, that's what I feel where all of those modalities have taken me.
Well, I agree with that. And the thing about it is, because when we were discussing the timeline therapy system, what comes down to is this, as far as I can see. What we first have to do, and you will know this better than most people out there, we have to get people to recognize that it's not just the physical, but it's also the energetic aspect of things that's going on.
Absolutely. That's a massive component to it.
And for a lot of people, that's a very hard step to take, because of the way this world is. And when we were discussing it earlier, it was really fascinating because you basically said something that used to be said on Star Trek quite a bit, and along the lines of time is not linear.
Yes.
And so
absolutely.
Being that is the case, what we have to do is you're trying to open up people to the fact that there is a heck of a lot more going on out there than meets the so-called physical eyes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I think for me, I guess, as a kid, I was always having unusual experiences where I was seeing things and not understanding it. And I can look back now and go, now I understand why I went on the journey that I went on. And although I'm quite a practical, level-headed, grounded person, I look at, especially when I'm working with people that come and they're just very mainstream and they've got their children that aren't in a good place, and you've got to try and explain this concept. And I guess the best way I would say that is, we have this perception that time is linear, and on another level, it's not the case, where the past, the present and the future are actually happening at the same time. And it's a bit of a hard concept to get your brain around. But because of that, if we've had a trauma or an upset or an upheaval somewhere in our life, maybe even, when we were 2 or 6, what happens is there ends up being a disruption in the timeline, or the way the energy is moving. It almost becomes jagged. It's not moving in a harmonious way. And that jaggedness is still rippling through today and affecting us today. So the timeline therapy or healing that I've been doing is actually to go back and correct, these, I guess, disjointed frequencies, and bring harmony back to whatever went on at that time. And it's been quite an amazing shift where here and now the situations, the upsets, the worries are shifting quite quickly and rapidly. So that's, been my my journey with it so far. I've had some really amazing changes with people that have been coming for some time, and you make progress. But some of these things, especially if they're, old baggage that is really quite traumatic, it's very difficult to remove the layers of these traumas and upsets, and even sickness,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's a question for you. How do you handle, your average person comes in, as you said, they could have a child that's in distress, and you're doing timeline therapy on them, and you can basically scan back over time. Everyone has an energy body, whether they want to admit it or not.
Yeah.
And you can see whether or not there are disruptions or negativities there, and you can try to remove them. But as far as the parent, let's say, is concerned, how do you explain this to them, knowing the fact that some people do not accept the fact that there are other bodies, energetic bodies, and some people don't accept the fact that we live multiple lifetimes?
Yeah. I think, I find that keeping it as simple as I can and just sort of explaining that what I tend to do is I will actually start scanning through the person's energy and start saying to them, I feel something major happened at this, because the energy doesn't lie. I can almost pinpoint it to the, to the age, to the, where the person was at in their life. And I guess I've just learnt to actually recognise that disruption, and I'll say to that person, what happened here and here, because I feel like this point in time is when your energy really went down. And I tend to find that makes the person quite receptive, and especially with parents. I'll say, okay, because I had a lady come to see me with their child who was 3 and super anxious, and wouldn't look at me, wouldn't leave mum, just sat there, and she said, I can't take this child anywhere, there's separation anxiety, and it's starting to become a real issue. And I said, okay. So when I scanned through, I said to her, what happened to this child at 1? I said, because at 1, this is when it all started. And initially she was like, oh, no, I don't know. And I said, okay. And I said to her, look, it's very strong that at that age there was something quite traumatic that went on. And she said, oh, actually my child had an immunisation and ended up hospitalised for a month. And I'm like, okay, well, that'll do it, and obviously being separate from mum. So as I started to work on the child, what was really interesting, I have this little trampoline in my clinic, and when he walked in, I said, come and sit on the trampoline, and didn't want to have a bar of that. So as I started working, he got up and he put the trampoline down and started jumping, and he started talking to me, and the mother was quite amazed that, how she actually saw it changing in front of her eyes, which was, wonderful for her. And she said to me after she left, she rang me and she said, I've just gone to this coffee shop that we go to. It has a play area. Her little boy won't go in there, won't talk to anyone. Walked in, spoke to the guy that ran the cafe, sat down, played, when she picked her daughter up from school, went up, spoke to the kids, and then the next day went to daycare and just waved goodbye, which she said is normally a 40-minute traumatic screaming episode. So she was like, I can't believe how quickly that shifted. And the beauty about children is they shift super quick because they've got less rubbish than us. So it's been, I guess, when parents come with kids and they get to sit in the room and they actually get to have that experience and watch that progression, they become more receptive and go, well, something is actually happening here. I don't know what it is, but it's happening.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's really very good.
Beyond 3D.
A couple of other things here. You say it's timeline therapy, so let's do it for the adults, get into the esotericness of this.
Yeah.
Okay, if we talk timeline and we say time is not linear,
Yes.
Multiple lifetimes happening concurrently.
Yes.
So for all the guys on this show, they know the way we are here. So what we're talking about is we are talking about the fact that we are here in this timeline on Earth. There are past lives we've been through. There are future lives we are going to go through. Based upon what let's specifically look at the past. Based upon looking at a past lifetime, there could have been a trauma in a past lifetime that you, with timeline therapy, can pick up that might explain why someone is going through, some chronic condition in this lifetime?
Absolutely. I've actually, there's a good person to talk about here. This is a young woman who was seriously anxious, had been most of her life, and it was just getting progressively worse.
Mm-hmm.
And she came along, and she, to the point where she wasn't able to leave her house really or function. She didn't want to go down the medication line, so she was just trying to manage herself. So I always start with clearing this life first, because I tend to sort of think, well, let's knock all of this out first and make sure that it's not coming from, this lifetime. So once I'd done that, and I find doing a decade at a time tends to be enough for a person. And most children, you can do that if they're young in one go, but, the older we are, we may need a couple of goes to just work through our life. And I've gone through that process with her, and she definitely made some positive shifts, but there was still this anxiety in the background where she said it's just constantly there, and I don't know how I'm going to move on from that. So one day I was treating her, and all of a sudden I got strongly, I was told, you need to go back 4 lifetimes ago. And I'm like, okay. So I travelled back 4 lifetimes ago, and I saw her as a soldier, what seemed to be like someone in battle. And she was a he. And he was laying there, and he was dying, and there was that fear about dying alone and being alone, and I was witnessing this thinking, okay, I'm just going to treat this as if I was treating now. So I applied the timeline therapy to that point in time, and she had it was quite a big session for her, because she sort of opened her eyes and said to me, oh my God, what just happened? So I said to her, look, this is what I saw, and this is what, and she just looked actually totally different after the treatment. And from that point on, her anxiety went, which was amazing, and it made me realise, because of course, I'm aware of past lives, but I hadn't dug into it. I just sort of was in the whole headspace of, okay, I know they're there, but this life's tricky enough, and I'm just sort of sticking to this one. And I was thrown back into, 4 lives ago with her, and she's like a different person. So that was really a great, experience for me too, to go, wow,
Well, for me, I think what it comes down to is this. So what you just said was you got to go back 4 lifetimes in this person. That's going to be very difficult if a person only believes suffers from the you only live once theory.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that means there has to be a bit of education done here. So, guys, if you just bear with me, what I'm going to basically say is this. Yes, you have your physical you here right now, but we also have a higher self, you also have a soul, and you also have what is called a monad. And if you want to think about it, the monad is as close to God as you can possibly get. And it's almost as if we're at ground level, you can basically see to the horizon. If you rise up into the sky, the horizon becomes further and further away. You can actually see more. From the position of the monad, your divine self, the monad, you can see the past, the now, and the so-called future, because it's all one and it blends in, and you're just looking over all of this. So we live many lifetimes. Our souls do not just come here. They're not just Matthew and Adele. They're also attached to other entities, other human entities in different realms that are doing different things and learning different things at the same time, per se. What I mean by that is, if you owned a business, you can work in Melbourne here. You can then travel to Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth. Or you can hire a person to be in each one of those places and report back to you. The soul hires people to come to different realms and different planes, experience things, and report back. That's the gist of what's going on, even though most people have a very hard time fathoming the fact that there are many multiple lifetimes across the so-called timeline. So as you are working with people with timeline therapies, you know this yourself. How do you ultimately, as you work with people, bring them along to understand and accept some of those concepts?
I think I've found, and it is tricky because in some ways, because I have been finding lately that most of the people that are coming are not people that actually, not that they're not open, because obviously they're open enough if they've come to see me, but
fair enough.
It's not they're sort of like, I don't know about that stuff, that's that airy-fairy stuff. And I'm getting more of that, so which I think is a good thing, because obviously there's something shifting that's making people, become more open and receptive. But I've sort of found that through, sitting down and just giving a brief explanation about, okay, there's a problem here, yep, it started here, okay, I'm just going to try and correct that point in time, and if you just go with me, and most of the time they feel so different afterwards that it speaks for itself, and then I can start to slowly say, look, what happened this time is this, and this. So it's like we go on a little bit of a journey together.
Yeah.
And I keep it pretty simple, but then by the end of it, the people that I never thought would have been on board are actually like, wow, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Now, do you find, now, most of your clients, do you have more men, more women, a mix of both? What would you say?
I have probably more women. I do have men that come too, but it is probably more mothers, actually. Yeah. I do work a lot with mother and child and children.
Right. I'll tell you why I'm saying that is because of late I've noticed as I start mentioning certain things, a lot more of the men are actually experiencing things that you wouldn't think, because if anybody that's been around spiritual circles, what you find is the fact that normally you will see a ratio of women to men 2 to 1.
Yeah, definitely.
But what I'm noticing now, I can bring up something about, let's say, going to one of the old asylums and people take pictures and they can actually see the after images of the people that were there. And guys are now starting to say, "Oh yeah, I went into this place and I felt this kind of energy." And I have really started hearing more and more of that from a lot of the guys out there. So I think there definitely is a shift going on.
Definitely. Look, I find too, because a lot of women would say to me in the past, "Oh, my husband needs to come," but the husband wasn't going to come. Whereas now, the husband is more receptive to coming. So there's definitely, I would agree, a shift there.
Okay, now, let's get back down to the mundane aspect of it a little bit now. What you're talking about with timeline therapies, and we mentioned this before when we were discussing this off air, we were talking about the fact that it has a lot to do with the endocrine system.
Yes.
So how about going into a little bit about that?
And how this all came to be, really. I mean, working with this, I believe this energy that I went and connected to in Thailand is the energy that actually has been giving me this information. And, basically was saying that the pineal gland is the gateway.
And the pineal gland is located in the brain? In
the brain, that's correct. And you've got your pineal, your pituitary, and you've got your whole endocrine system. And we are, we're hormonal beings. We're run by our hormones. And this system is a very powerful system. And it literally is like a memory chip inside of this gland. It stores all the information. So what I'm actually doing is I'm finding that you have to access this timeline, I guess we're going to call it, through these glands, because that's where the data is, basically.
So it's like going into, so you take your computer, there's a problem, there's a glitch or something, and it's like running into fragmenting software or something like that. to get to the certain sector that needs to be corrected.
Absolutely, and it's all stored in there, and that's why we have children, and one's so different to the other, and they've both had the same upbringing, but why is one so? Because all this information of their past is anchored in this chip, and then it plays out through the system.
Absolutely.
So, we have to correct it on that level so that there is a shift within the physical body now and time and space now, So, that's been very interesting to watch that unravel, that, we are amazingly, what's the word? Yeah, like a computer chip. Everything is stored in there. There's no getting away from this stuff.
Nope. Not at all. Yeah, and for all the guys out there, the pineal gland in the brain, in a lot of the spiritual paths, they talk about it and they call it by another name, and that name is the blue pearl. And so it'll be called the blue pearl, the blue being, but it is a physical gland. It is in the brain, and these days they talk a lot about the calcification of it.
Yeah.
And the fact that with diet, as we discussed earlier, and food, you have to eat the right things, feed the body properly so that you can decalcify it, and that way you have full access to it. Then it's a matter of learning how to access that gland and the information contained within.
That's correct, absolutely. And these kids too, like now are, all systems go with these children, and our way of working through life now is not working for them. So when I see some of these kids, that part of their system, their clairvoyant faculties, it's like super heightened and switched on, and we can't manage them the way we're managing it, basically. So
so we have to update our systems as well.
I have to update it. We've got to keep up with them. They're way ahead, So definitely.
Now, Adele, I want to thank you for spending this time with us this week on Beyond 3D. So your website is www.adeleedwards, all one word, .com.au.
That's correct.
So you guys can get on there and take a look at Adele and what work she is trying to do. All of the information is there, phone numbers, clinical hours, etc. And you guys, we'll put it up on our Facebook page, the Beyond 3D Facebook page as well. And a modality that is based upon, in my opinion, the way I would put it is it's based on distilled knowledge.
Yeah.
You have been through a lot through your lifetimes. You have studied a lot of the modalities, and you have now been given, through channeling, in a sense, a modality that can take you forward, can take your clients forward, and can help bring us into this new era. Because a couple of weeks back, guys, if you didn't know it, there was a major spiritual shift that happened worldwide. And lots, what we were talking about, a lot more people are waking up. So all of the information for Adele will be up on the Facebook page, and the website will be up in a month, and so we'll put all the stuff up there as well. And Adele, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening on Beyond 3D, and hopefully we can get together and do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Matt. That was wonderful.
No problem whatsoever. Back in a moment, guys.
Beyond 3D. Welcome back to Beyond 3D, and thank you, Matt and Adele Edwards. That was a wonderful interview in regards to timeline therapy. And if you'd like any more information, go to Adele's website, www.adeleedwards.com.au. That's Adele Edwards, one word, .com.au. Coming up next, we have a really, really vital and important message from Dr. Stephen Greer, who is currently headlining the Disclosure Project and the movement to bring out free energy technology. Free energy technology that pulls energy from the 0 point field. Beyond 3D.
Yes, hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Greer, and founder of the Disclosure Project, and this is a special announcement about a new campaign we are launching this week, and that is to end permanently the secrecy around UFOs and free energy devices. All of you are familiar with the work we did with Sirius, which became the top pick on Netflix in the past year. And I'd like to thank all of you for supporting that project. This project and the Disclosure Project launch in 2001 at the National Press Club are really focusing purely on top secret, unacknowledged special access projects that deal with the UFO, extraterrestrial, and free energy or zero-point energy fields. And what we're doing with this campaign is not just advocating for the government to do something. This is the campaign that will actually end the illegal secrecy. And what's key about the words here is that we are doing this, not the government. And I think you have to understand that the people are the government in a democracy. And our government has completely failed us on this and many other issues and is dysfunctional and corrupt. Therefore, it's incumbent on us, the people of the world, not just the United States, to come together to support this endeavor. We are now working with people from all over the world who have access to archives dealing with the UFO subject, government top secret witnesses, videos, photographs, and other material. And we are asking you, the public, to support this campaign. And you can go to our website, SeriousDisclosure.com, to support it in a number of ways. But one of the chief distinctions I want to make between this and other disclosure efforts that are going on is that this is not an effort to ask anyone else to do it. This is a campaign where we, the people, actually do it. And we are therefore calling this the campaign that actually ends the illegal secrecy. Illegal is a key word here, and I want all the military, corporate, intelligence officials, government officials who know about the operations that deal with UFOs, advanced technologies such as zero-point anti-gravity, gravity control, and related subjects, that those projects, even though you may not be aware of it because you are in a compartment away from most of the other leadership of the organizations that manage them, are being run illegally. I will get more into this in a moment. What the public needs to understand is that the future of our civilization, not only in how we live on this planet and whether we have an environment and an biosphere, an ecosystem to live in, will be here, but also how we're going to live into the future and what our relationship will be with these interstellar civilizations is hanging in the balance. And so this isn't something that we can expect the next president or the next Congress or the next Parliament in England or whoever to deal with. Personally, I have been involved at that level since 1992, whether it be top generals at the Pentagon, the Clinton administration, the CIA director for President Clinton, etc. And what I have seen is that there is enormous interest in those corridors, but for the most part, they don't have access to these unacknowledged special access projects. Keyword, USAP. And since they don't, there's only so much that they can do. And so what we are doing is what perhaps they are either afraid to do, don't have the courage to do, perhaps get threatened when they try, or simply feel that it's too big for them to take on. One senator said to us, what you're asking me to do is to reel in a 2,000-pound whale, and I have a 5-pound line. I can't do it. So ultimately, what I think we have to realize is that this is exactly the situation that Thomas Jefferson and others spoke of, that periodically the people have to come together and make these changes ourselves and not be passive and sheep-like waiting for the government to do it. And it's for this reason that over the 26 years I've been involved with this is by far the largest campaign I've been involved with. And we're going to need your help, every one of you, whether you can help network this to people on your Facebook page, on your social media, Twitter, whether you can help be a scout for us to find new top secret whistleblowers who are in these programs and who don't know that they're being managed illegally. It may be a father, it may be an uncle, it may be a husband or wife or a friend or a neighbor. They are out there. And what we are calling for is for everyone to come together and support this campaign. So Sirius sort of introduced the scope of our work to the public. This is going to drill down in a granular way on these top secret illegal projects, the technologies that they are hiding, where they are, who's doing it, and how they're managed. And we will prove in this film that they are being managed illegally. Now here I want to make a comment, and this is something incredibly important. Over the last month, I have met a number of people who also have access to a featured technology. Now this is something we are still running to ground. I do not want people to think we have it secured yet, but we're on very close to the acquisition of one or more of these systems, even if they are prototypes. And when I refer to these devices and technologies, I'm talking about a closed-loop free energy device, something that runs itself. The input is charged from the output, and it is running and powering things, putting out usable kilowattage of power, or wattage. We know these have existed for over 100 years, since the time of Tesla and before, and they have always been suppressed, so that the world can quickly adopt the technology and pull us out of the precipice, away from the precipice that we are plunging down. And that is a biosphere collapse due to our use of fossil fuels and nuclear power and the increasing have and have not impoverishment of the world that is necessary, unfortunately, when you're using fossil fuel systems and central utilities. Half the world's population is in enormous poverty, and this is an artificial result of the energy system and the basic infrastructure our civilization is using. But we really can't do it alone. We need your networking support, because the reason we survived the launch of the Disclosure Project is that there were millions of people watching. Anyone who tries to do something like this in obscurity, I was told in 1991 by a national security attorney, they are all dead men walking. However, if we come together in unity to do this together and bring millions of people, billions if we can, onto the platform, we can launch this technology and launch this information in a way that simply cannot be stopped. And that's what every person listening to this has to understand. I want to empower each of you to view yourselves as citizens of the earth, but also citizens of the cosmos. And that it is our charge, it is our challenge, it's our task to begin a new civilization on this planet that can go forward into space in peace and using free energy and have a just civilization on Earth where we eliminate once and for all environmental destruction and punishing poverty, which is now so prevalent around the world. Only then are we worthy to be welcomed into the neighborhood of interplanetary and interstellar civilizations. So this is the great challenge of our time. And you cannot have peace in this world when you're living in a system that is so unjust that it guarantees half the world is in horrible poverty. And for those of us who aren't in horrible poverty, our very existence is cannibalizing Mother Earth and destroying her. This is no way for a people to live. 100 years ago, there were cans kicked down the road. 50 years ago, on the UFO and ET issue, cans were kicked down the road. We don't have another 100 years. Neither the geopolitical situation nor the environmental situation can withstand another 100 years of inaction, passivity, and cowardice.
Beyond 3D.
We have many people in our network who worked in unacknowledged special access projects. Now this is very different from a special access project or special access personnel. It was reported in the media about Hillary Clinton having access to SAP. Well, of course, many people do. A special access project is simply a compartmentalized project within the intelligence system. And there are only 3 levels of classification: confidential, secret, and top secret. It's the compartment that you're in that is key. Now, Edward Snowden, he disclosed something called PRISM, among other things. PRISM was a special access project, but it was acknowledged. The president knew about it, the Congress knew about it, the key members of the intelligence committees. We're talking about unacknowledged special access projects that are funded to the tune of $100 to $200 billion a year that are illegal because they will not tell anyone that is not in that compartment what they're doing. And I have a number of people who worked in these projects. And for example, one Navy gentleman was in one project that was between $2 and $3 billion. One unacknowledged special access project compartment. These projects are exactly the fulfillment of what Eisenhower warned us about when he said, beware of the military-industrial complex. And so it's for this reason that I want people to understand that what we're exposing are not all secrets within the U.S. government or all secrets within the British government. We're only exposing, and this is going to be the greatest expose in history on this, projects that are unacknowledged and are being run illegally. I want to make this distinction very clearly so that people do not get confused. There's a lot of confusion on this in the public. And we stay on very safe ground when we are exposing projects that are being run illegally. Because let's face it, if the President of the United States or the CIA director or these senior fellows at the Pentagon, generals and admirals I've met with, and Ministry of Defense head in the United Kingdom, are being denied access and lied to about projects going on under their own command, but that are unacknowledged special access projects, that is by definition unconstitutional and illegal. It violates all oversight requirements of the Constitution and of the National Security Act. So we want to be really clear that those are the projects that we are going to bring forward and let people know about. And the reason these projects have such extreme secrecy around them is because the implications are so vast. But these implications and the secrecy has become a threat to all life on Earth. The first head of the CIA, who after he retired, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, said in a letter that I have, that the secrecy around UFOs is a threat to the national security. The UFOs are not a threat. He did not say that. The secrecy is a threat. And so it's not only a threat to the national security of the United States and other countries, it is now, and that was in 1961, it is now 50 some years later, has become an existential threat to all life on Earth, because we are now destroying the biosphere and also creating a geopolitical time bomb where there's so much poverty and disparity of income that it can go in only one direction, and that is violent global revolution, unless we fix it. And so that's why this issue is so important. It is not a trivial issue. Now this word gets overused, and I'm now talking not just of nationalistic patriotism, but patriotism as a human being for their fellow humans. But even if you're talking about patriotism in your country, it is not patriotic at all to sit on secrets that are being kept away from the President of the United States or the Congress, the people's representative, when we supposedly live in a democracy and a free society. That is not patriotism. That is going along with a fascist, authoritarian, illegal operation. I want to be very clear on that. Therefore, the people who come forward are not at all violating their national security oaths, morally or legally. Now, what do I mean by that? Very quickly, and And I did an entire 4-hour workshop on this that you can see on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/sdisclosure. This brings up this question of how did we get the first 100 or so of the military and intelligence witnesses to come forward 15 years ago this year, in fact May 9th, 2001. Because from 1992 until 1998, I went throughout the U.S. government and other governments and proved that key people in the CIA, the director, for example, of the CIA, the president, key people at the Pentagon, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the head of intelligence for the Joint Staff, the head of the Ministry of Defense in Great Britain, on and on. This was me meeting with these folks and learning that they had personally been denied access to these projects. Therefore, those projects are unconstitutional and illegal. They're rogue. So since they have chosen to opt out of the legal and constitutional system, all national security oaths and agreements, whether it's with a corporation or an agency such as the CIA or National Security Agency, NSA, or the Pentagon or any division of the Pentagon or any other government agency, are null and void. This assessment was sent to the heads of every agency in the United States government in late 1997. And we will show you this document. And it went return, receipt, requested. In other words, we have proof that it was received. And the way this was done is in the military, there's something called unless otherwise directed, UNOD. You know, military guys, just like medical guys like myself, love acronyms. But UNOD means unless otherwise directed. So the way this letter was formatted under the advice of a very experienced military analyst was that we sent this assessment that I have just shared to the key agencies in the United States government and said that unless otherwise directed, we are going to assume that this assessment is correct, the projects are illegal, and all personnel, documents, and material, meaning extraterrestrial or free energy devices, biological samples of extraterrestrial life forms are liberated. They're free to be disclosed because the projects that are managing this endeavor are themselves illegal enterprises that are unconstitutional. From 1997 until now, which is April 2016, 19 years almost, there has not been a single agency or person, privately or publicly, to contradict that assessment. And therefore, all of you who are listening, who work at Pahut Mesa, so-called Area 51, Dugway Proving Grounds, Edwards Air Force Base, Lockheed Skunk Works in the Cube, Pine Gap facility in Australia, etc. and so on, you are not required to go along with any secrecy oaths that you have signed. I am asking all of you to contact me at witnesses@seriousdisclosure.com. We'll put that up on the screen. Witnesses@seriousdisclosure.com. And you will be handled with the utmost confidentiality and professionalism. If you have documents or material, those can also be handed over. So those of you who are witnesses to UFO research projects, zero-point energy, gravity control projects, ET technology transfer operations, and so forth, I'd ask for you to contact us as soon as possible. And I also would ask that those of you who have knowledge of the counterintelligence programs that have staged illegal mutilation and abduction projects also contact us. And those of you with knowledge of SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, which has been piggybacking within it a operation to target extraterrestrial vehicles as they approach Earth or around the Earth. In addition, civilian victims, firsthand, who have clear memory or evidence, video or otherwise, of having been abducted or been witness to paramilitary human involvement in military abductions and mutilations that are staged to appear as extraterrestrial, please contact us immediately. Now, those of you with such a claim will need to be able to have some sort of corroboration to prove it, unless there's incredibly strong other corroborating witnesses to it. But we know that this is going on. We know that many of the people who have been victims of these operations have been, in a sense, cannon fodder on a psychological warfare campaign to prepare the public for a false or cosmic flag operation. A false flag operation, it basically is when covert military or intelligence operations stage something when there's no evidence for it in order to manipulate the masses. I mean, this is exactly how we got into the Iraq War, with evidence that didn't exist. The Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam was an exaggeration, if not a complete falsification of an attack on our ships in Vietnam to stampede the Congress into funding that disastrous endeavor. And we know from sources inside the covert, unacknowledged special access projects that these plans are in place to hoax a threat from outer space. Those of you who know of the plans or who have been involved in the tactical operations dealing with this hoaxing need to contact us, as we wish also to expose those operations so that the public is not deceived again, or can be, or as the WHO said, we won't be fooled again into another disastrous conflict, which this time they were trying to create an interplanetary conflict.
Beyond 3D. Welcome back to Beyond 3D. That's all we have time for this week. Fingers crossed, Matt and I will both be back in the studio together next week. If you haven't had a chance to check out our Facebook page, go to Beyond 3 hyphen and the letter D on Facebook, and feel free to join. Be sure to check back next week. I know Matt's got a lot of information he wants to share with everybody, and so do I, for that matter of fact, and I hope everyone out there has a great week coming up. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.